Hi guys, and if you haven't seen me before, my name's Jake and I run this channel, Progress is Everything. On this channel we cover videos about freelancing, small business and personal finance. In this video we're going to be talking about working out of the client's offices and some of my own experiences. I'm going to be covering four main things: people, location, the type of work it was, how I found it, and the pace of work. The first thing I'm going to talk about, or the first type of company, is a finance SME, a finance small to medium-sized enterprise. When I joined, there were around 100 people working out of a city location in London, which is famous for financial institutions, and I joined at a growth period. So what can I say about this kind of business and what the offices and the office location, the vibe was? The people. The people at this finance SME were very dynamic and interesting. What I could say is I saw a broad trend towards two different things. Number one, the finance SME would hire very driven individuals. For example, they'd hire people that are driven from the sports field. Anybody that's achieved success in a sporting field. For example, myself, I was very accomplished in breakdancing many years ago. But the interesting thing is that when I chatted to individuals that worked at this company, I found a common trend that different people had these different experiences. One had been a semi-professional rugby player, one had been a semi-professional tennis player, another was into polo, another was into swimming. And I found there were a lot of these individuals that had this sort of drive and sort of link between sports and their career. A second type of individual that was working at this kind of company was the sort of private educated Oxbridge, for all of our non-UK audience, an Oxbridge type individual is somebody that's gone to Oxford University or Cambridge, very high levels of educational attainment. So that's what I saw, the two different types of people that worked in this kind of environment. What about the location? The location was an interesting location, East London, quite easy for me to get to because I lived in East London, but very historic, known for financial organisations. The City of London is known as, where all the investment banks are, that kind of thing, or many of the investment banks. And it was built up, there was lots of shops, there was lots of places to eat, there was lots of restaurants, hotels. It's quite a buzzing location. That's kind of interesting. What kind of work was I doing? Well, for my audience, I work in digital marketing or online marketing, and I was covering lots of different things within that. Customer acquisition as well as customer retention. I was managing all of the digital channels, including the website. I found it fascinating work. What about the pace? Because this is an SME and it's working in the financial markets are quite high pace anyway. In particular, I was working in the Forex markets, which is the foreign exchange markets. Now, unlike a lot of markets or a lot of financial markets, these markets run 24/7, which means they're the most highly paced market that I'm aware of. I believe the foreign exchange markets are actually the most traded market in the world. I know there's trillions of pounds or trillions of dollars exchanged on a daily basis. What else can I say about working from this finance SME? They treated their staff very well. We would have weekly socials. In these socials, we'd be provided free beer, free wine, champagne, drinks, and other drinks, soft drinks, etc., as well as a selection of sort of canapes or snacks to have. This was a great sort of cultural experience where you could get to know different people from different departments. The other thing they would do is they'd have other sort of games. They would have table tennis, foosball, other little tournaments, and this sort of inspired a lot of social interaction amongst people within their own teams as well as cross-team interaction. I found this was really interesting, and over a period of time I really grew to enjoy this sort of culture. What about the financial corporation? This was an international organisation with over 10,000 employees globally. How did that differ? The people working out of this global multinational business were very different from working for the financial SME. Despite being in the same industry, the global multinational was also in the foreign exchange markets. The actual people that were working there were very different. Within my company location, I was working out of a place called King's Place, which is opposite the new Google building in King's Cross, London. Within that location, there were many people that would be working within that company for many years. They were looking for a stable job. They were looking for stable lifestyle and culture. This is what the financial global multinational did provide. So thinking about the people that worked in this financial global multinational company compared to the SME, they tended to be slower paced individuals. They generally weren't into, they didn't have a background of sports or high levels of attainment in any particular sport or anything like that. There were some Oxbridge type individuals, so there's some sort of comparison there, but there were a lot of more stable employees. I'd say the company culture at the large global multinational was more to do with stability than pace. If we compare the SME versus the global multinational tends to work at a much slower pace than the sort of startup environment. That was reflected in the company culture and the individuals that worked there. The individuals were looking for more stability. Projects tended to be extended over many, many months, whereas when we compare that to the SME, projects might have been days or weeks long. It's a much faster pace of work in this one. So a much faster pace working in the SME versus that global multinational. The other thing I can say about the people working in the global multinational, it sort of gives it away in the title, they were global. So we'd have operations and interactions with people out of the United States, out of Asia, out of Europe, etc. When you compare that to the startup, we were London-based and we actually had offices in India as well, but it was mostly a London-based company. There are pros and cons to working with an international workforce. I actually work for one in a similar organisation right now, but thinking about the financial global multinational, you have to work with different time zones, you have to work with different cultures, and that can be an interesting thing as well as the pros and cons to that. I may do a separate video about working in a global multinational because there's a lot of things, pros and cons to talk about within that. What about the work? Well, the work was very similar, but I would say it was more strategic and project-based. When you're working at the coalface in an SME, you're expected to do a lot of the work yourself, whereas when you're working in a global multinational, there's often lots and lots of people working in a particular project. I worked in the largest global project within the organisation, and there was somewhere between 300 to 400 people working on that specific project. That was the project team, but however, it probably impacted another 10 times that amount, so maybe 4,000 people globally. That's actually 40 times the amount of people that were working in the financial SME. What does that mean? In terms of the work, or the workload, or type of work I was doing, it was much more around forecasting the implications of the projects I was working on, rather than the day-to-day. In particular, I was doing GTM or go-to-market strategies for this global market leader. What that meant was, when somebody had an idea, essentially launching it into market would be very much more complicated than at the sort of SME level. I can't go into the details around the specific project, but when you're working for these global multinationals, you're working with big project teams, and you can understand, or it's fairly easy to recognize. I can't mention the particular details, but what I can say is that working for global multinationals tends to involve more strategic type work and also higher levels of communication than working with the SMEs, which tends to focus more on technical knowledge and skill. I guess what I could say about the pace of work was that the global multinational, I felt that there was more awareness of work-life balance. That can be really great if you've got a family, you've got kids to look after, or if you've got a key hobby or things that you like to do outside of work. If you work for a larger organisation, they tend to have more flexibility on that kind of thing, more of awareness of diversity, work-life balance, etc. The last example I'm going to give is talking for a small startup which only had 30 employees. Just to give you some context and background, I've actually worked at several different startups, ranging from having only 4 or 5 employees. I've worked at one which had 10 employees, I've worked at another that had 30 employees, another that had 100 employees. So pretty much covering the whole range of startups. In this particular example, I'm going to talk about the startup which had 30 employees. I was there for around 2 months on a short-term contract. And I'm going to jump into the details right now. What about the people that were working there? I sort of felt there was a sort of mix of people, from your sort of go-getter freelancers to also your lifers or steady employees. Why was that? I think there's a number of reasons for this. The CEO and hiring team liked to, in this particular startup, they wanted to hire people that had experience working in big brands. That meant that you often got people that worked in larger organizations sort of pulled into the startup environment. The other type of employee that they would hire are sort of results-driven freelancers, people like myself. So you had this interesting balance between people which were more used to project-based work in a sort of slower manner, even though they were using sort of agile type project management. Still, the speed of the sprints they were using. So you had that interesting balance of people that wanted to work quite quickly and deliver quickly, the freelancers, versus the experienced staff that had maybe worked at large organizations, like Tesco or Vodafone, that kind of thing, who were looking for a sort of slower pace of life. I thought that was kind of an interesting juxtaposition. What about the location? Well, this particular startup was based in Brick Lane, which is an exciting area of London where a lot of tech startups are emerging. Actually, they've been sort of emerging for the last couple of years. It was a great location to go out for lunch, loads of different places, and a lot of sort of buzz and vibe around that sort of area. What about the work? In particular, in this organization, I was just looking at customer acquisition, helping the startup to grow. Sort of an off-the-record thing I can probably say in general terms is that when I joined, I improved their customer acquisition pretty substantially, and then when I left, they sort of went back to their previous sort of method of doing things, and that reduced results by around 5 to 6 times, 500 to 600% difference. You do find that sometimes consultants or freelancers aren't always listened to. You might spend a lot of time actually putting a sort of strategy together, and in some cases, in this case in particular, it was implemented for maybe a week or so, and then the strategy changed because of the dynamics of freelancers versus employees and that sort of politics, that kind of thing. Freelancers out there, if you've got any experience with this, I'm sure you all have, whack it down in the comments, let us know, let the community know, and share your experiences, because it sort of helps all of us grow. What about the pace? As I mentioned, the pace in the startups is sort of interesting. You have the sort of pressure of getting results quickly, juxtaposed with some of those employees who wanted to do things in a very steady manner, maybe not understanding all of the different technologies out there that could speed things up. So there's sort of that tension of we need to get results quickly, but there are sort of processes that the sort of lifers want to put in place. So that sort of tension pulling the freelancers in different directions. So an interesting pace. I quite like the fast-paced nature, and the way I balanced it was I would just report into the person that hired me to say this is my approach, and this is sort of explain my sort of line of thinking and strategy, and then let the internal politics sort of take care of itself. As a contractor or freelancer, that's essentially what you can and probably should do. The moment you get involved in politics, for me at least, that's it's sort of a slippery slope downwards. Better to just focus on the reasons you were hired and get as much done in the best sort of capacity that you can. Okay guys, that's just an insight into some of my own experience about working in the freelance client's location, the style, the atmosphere, the culture, the pace, etc. If you've want to share any comments about your own experiences, please do in the comments below. If you're interested in this channel, make sure to subscribe, like it, check out my other playlists. I've got playlists on the pros and cons of freelancing, contracting, online work, portfolio work. I've got pros and cons and tips and tricks on the finances behind freelancing, maybe even growing and starting your own small business, personal finance, etc., etc. If you've got a particularly difficult situation, you can always ask for my advice directly by emailing me at progressiseverything@gmail.com. In addition, I have some published courses that I'm producing. You can check those out on my website at www.progressiseverything.com. There'll also be exclusive videos posted only on my website. If you think that I'm providing value to you, please do share this video with friends and family. Anybody that's considering freelancing, maybe hates their job, maybe a freelancer that needs to get more work. I've got videos on customer acquisition, improving their CVs, resumes, portfolios, websites to use, and things like that. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and to show your appreciation, if you want, you can smash that like button, subscribe, tick that bell icon to hear more about my future videos, and guys, I'll see you in the next video. Make sure you check out my other videos for tips, tricks, and hacks, as well as other pros and cons.